I've always questioned the why and always was fascinated with helping people recover from things they were told were permanent, genetic, and they could never live without. All of us are going to be confronted with poisons, toxins, infections the rest of our life. I felt a spark literally in May of 2020 when I read a document on the NIH's website that Anthony Fauci had put out that there was one experimental drug that was only allowed to be used in hospitals around the country for COVID-19 hospitalized Americans. And only America was going to use it for the first year of COVID. There are millions of people around the world right now who are still suffering with symptoms related to COVID. And if you're watching, there's somebody in your life who's either struggling. I want to mention what we know that is creating all of these symptoms that linger for so long.
Your partnership with Daystar was able to get those messages that are mostly censored to millions of people. And how many emails and phone calls do we get?
Oh, from all over.
Thanking doctors who said, I was on Joni's show or I was on Mystery Now and I saw a doctor and I didn't take the shot and you probably saved my life.
Well,
so
I've been interviewed dozens of doctors, all our friends, that Dr. Bartlett and Simone Gold and Pierre Corey and I could go on and on, Peter McCullough. It was just a whole bunch of you guys that were, and girls and gals, that were saying something's not right here. Something's not right. When did you first kind of realize what was going on? Did it start with your father-in-law and what happened with him?
Yeah, when it comes to the medical profession, it wasn't just my father-in-law. I was questioning everything related to diagnoses, medical diagnoses, prognosis. Even with family members, when I was 21 years old, I always questioned, how come there's not more cures for conditions or diseases, and why do so many people have to suffer the rest of their lives with chronic illnesses? So I've always questioned the why and always was fascinated with helping people recover from things they were told were permanent, genetic, and they could never live without. So this is a long-standing thing.
Anything is possible, like that song, like you were that guy.
Oh, what's so miraculous about the New Testament? It's all the miracle healings that everyone now gravitates to. It brings them to Christ, it brings them to the Lord in hope for their own salvation and their own freedom from the suffering that they're encountering in this life. And this is why I felt a spark literally in May of 2020 when I read a document on the NIH's website that Anthony Fauci had put out that there was one experimental drug that was only allowed to be used in hospitals around the country for COVID-19 hospitalized Americans. And only America was going to use it for the first year of COVID. And that drug was called Remdesivir. And when I read the studies that he actually claimed made the drug efficacious, he said, and safe to be used against Ebola and COVID-19, to read those studies and to understand he was flat out lying to the American people and to the world, that I felt an immediate spark from God, I believe, that my entire adult life in helping patients recover from their symptoms they've been diagnosed with and suffered from for 20 years in practice. I really do think that God led me to this path to feel like it was time to step away from practice to go now be ready to educate the world on what is the immune system he designed and put inside of us on day 6, which actually provides all those miracles you read about in the New Testament. And those miracles are still alive today. It's miraculous.
So talk a little bit, if you will, like the studies that were done on Remdesivir early on and why that they pulled that drug up knowing the side effects, knowing the people that had died from it, et cetera, the studies that showed that. How in the world could they, again, put it back in the marketplace to be used with COVID? Because, again, most of us know if you put on a vent, to put them on Remdesivir and they would die, would shut down the kidneys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because you taught me all of that. But what were the early studies on Remdesivir and how in the world did it get put back, to use in the hospital?
Yeah, that was my problem. That's why I actually went into the media, and thank God for outfits like Daystar who were committed to projecting truth in a platform where people could come confidently share things that were being censored around the world, and this was one of them. So Remdesivir was the drug named by Dr. Anthony Fauci in this NIH memo, and the 2 studies he quoted he said it was proven safe and effective against the Ebola virus in a study done for a year in Africa the year before COVID-19 in 2019. He said it was safe and effective against Ebola. Therefore, we're going to use it against COVID-19, this new virus. Then he said it was also found safe and effective against the COVID-19 virus in a short 3-month study from January to March of 2020. Both of these studies are right now on the New England Journal of Medicine's website. You can download them at pubmed.gov and read them. I decided the day I read this memo that they were proven safe and effective, I needed to read the studies because I'd never heard of this at the time, non-approved by the FDA drug. He called it an experimental drug, meaning it was not approved by the FDA to be safe and effective for anything. So I wanted to know, what was he referencing in these studies? So the 2019 study, it was a year-long study with 4 drugs, all to treat Ebola in 4 different regions of Africa. Remdesivir at month 6 was pulled in that 1-year study by the Independent Safety Board. They pulled the drug from the trial, reported to the funders that Remdesivir had the highest mortality rate of all the drugs, and over 53% of the people they gave it to died, which is higher than the death rate of Ebola. It was the only drug that had a higher than 50% death rate and was pulled from the study, along with another drug that had a 49% death rate, but Remdesivir was the worst. Then I found out, reading the study, that Dr. Anthony Fauci's department at the NIH funded that entire Ebola study. So he would have known the results a year earlier, before in May of 2020, making the claim it was found safe and effective against Ebola.
And so it was effective at killing people.
It was effective at killing more people than Ebola did.
And of course, one of the side effects that you talked about is that it was known for shutting down the kidneys, right?
Yes. So in the 3-month study that was done from January to March of 2020, this was the NIH giving the maker of Remdesivir a 3-month trial to test their own failed drug against Ebola on COVID-19 patients. At the end of their study, they published 30% of all people on that drug, Remdesivir, had acute kidney failure, renal failure, and up to 8% of all of them had to have kidney transplants in the first week of being given Remdesivir because it was so toxic, which led to the World Health Organization announcing in November of 2020, and it's in my book. I show you the document. World Health Organization made a press release for the entire world in November of 2020 and said no one hospitalized for COVID-19 in the entire world should be given Remdesivir.
And yet they continue to give it.
To this day. It is still being used in hospitals to this day. And don't be misled. They're not going to tell you the word Remdesivir anymore in the hospitals. Have you guys heard this? Now they've had secret meetings in the last 2 years. The administrators of hospitals are telling all their medical staff in the hospitals to not say the word Remdesivir anymore. Because when people hear it, they immediately say, I don't want it. I've heard about how dangerous it is. So now they say the brand name of the drug Remdesivir, and that brand name is Veklury. Don't forget it. If you hear the word Veklury or Remdesivir, this is proven to cause kidney failure.
How do you spell it?
It's spelled Veklury.
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 Okay. So if you hear that word, run.
If you hear Veklury or Remdesivir that runs with run, death is near.
Okay, so one of the things, of course, you're good friends with Dr. Bartlett, and he's going to be here, Dr. Richard Bartlett, through all of COVID. He was here, and he's a emergency room doctor here in Texas, very much loved and respected and honored even by our governor. And he found that using budesonide helped his COVID patients, which is something that you inhale, right? And so what happened with him and that whole thing?
Yeah, Dr. Richard Bartlett is a godsend. He's one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And in fact, when my own 94-year-old grandmother was struggling to get her oxygen level above 90 during COVID, I called Dr. Bartlett, and he told me what to do with budesonide and how to use it. So budesonide is a corticosteroid. So anybody that's ever used an asthma inhaler, that is a corticosteroid, and budesonide is one of these. So budesonide is already FDA approved, safe for all preemie babies in NICUs, newborn ICUs, all the way to people over 100 years old. It's been FDA approved, safe and effective. And Dr. Bartlett stated very early on in May or June of 2020, he did a huge interview that went viral around the world, seen by 5 million in one day, saying that you don't have to be afraid of COVID. We have a cure. It's budesonide. And he talks about being in the hospital on his ER shift and laying down and praying to God, how do I help these people? And he was actually told, budesonide will do it. And his experience, his education is bar none.
And so what happened? How did the medical community respond?
They destroyed him in the media. They
destroyed him.
They destroyed all faith, respect in Dr. Richard Bartlett, who has been respected by politicians and governors in Texas for years as an advisor to Rick Perry here in Texas. And then few months later, after he's being destroyed and people are saying, don't listen to him in the mainstream media, Oxford University in England decides to test his theory and his claim that budesonide was a very quick cure for COVID-19 patients. And they not only did it once, they did 2 studies and confirmed in both cases that budesonide, when used in COVID-19 positive patients, 90+% of them survived.
Okay, folks, there you go. The other, I'm thinking about Simone Gold and the frontline doctors. Remember, she was there in LA and used hydroxychloroquine and then saw a patient recover early 2020 and then was reprimanded and told she could not use hydroxychloroquine. And you know what they did to the frontline doctors. What did the media do to them?
Same thing they did to Dr. Richard Bartlett.
Tried to destroy them, their
Same
credibility.
thing they try to do with me. It's easier with me. They can just say, dismiss him. He's a retired chiropractor.
And I
Don't listen to
remember
him.
when Dr. Pierre Corey was here, and he was the one who testified before the Senate about ivermectin.
Yes.
And he was just as excited as Dr. Bartlett was, because he felt like this was a breakthrough, one of the safest, I'll let you talk about it, drugs in the world. And this was early on, and thought he would be embraced. Instead, what did they do with ivermectin?
Yeah, so ivermectin, what they do with the media, they decided to tell you all that this is a veterinarian drug used for horses only. So they called it horse paste and made everybody that used it look like they were ridiculous and dumb. When the truth is, in every CVS and Walgreens in America, every pharmacy in America that human beings go to get their prescriptions filled carry ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. So these are not animal drugs only. And in fact, ivermectin won a Nobel Prize in medicine in 2015 or 2016 for curing multiple human diseases, not horse diseases.
Right, and ivermectin has made a huge difference since. What are they saying now about ivermectin?
Yeah, so there's a big move right now to make ivermectin in the United States an over-the-counter medication because it has been so successful at helping to reverse and prevent COVID-19 symptoms, help some people reverse long COVID symptoms, and it's being published to help cure cancers all around the world.
Well, you know, I know you must be excited that Robert Kennedy Jr. has been appointed at the position to help make America healthy again, because, you know, he's been here several times talking about all the things we're talking about. He wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, who's like that thick, New York Times bestseller. But let's talk about, what did Anthony Fauci say early on about COVID and how it got here, how it started? Because you talk about all of this moving beyond the COVID-19 lies. That's the book right there by Dr. Bryan Ardis. Talk a little bit about what Dr. Fauci told us, what secular media told us, but what the truth is.
Yeah, this is a huge, I cannot believe how far this lie went around the world. So the first lie was they believed it came from a bat, like a bat coughed on everybody else in China and made the whole world sick. That's actually the title of my first chapter.
You have to get really close to a bat for a bat to cough on you.
You have to be within 6 feet.
Yeah.
Remember, it only goes 6 feet,
pretty far
that
deep
virus.
into a cave.
Not only that, but it's only when you
I don't even know
sit down.
if they actually cough, right?
No, only when you're standing up. When you sit.
That's right. When you're in a restaurant, remember, you could sit,
You'd sit.
without a mask
Oh,
on.
that's why it
You
worked.
couldn't
That's
stand.
why it worked, because
Virus-
bats fly.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So,
I never could
viruses
figure that out.
do not affect people
You
3
sit down,
feet,
you
4
can take
feet
your mask
lower.
off. Okay, got it.
Right.
Only those standing. All right, so there's a bunch of ridiculous things. So we were told it actually came from a bat. Then we were told maybe it came from a seafood market. Now you have to understand, this is a respiratory virus. That means it's spread through the air.
Right.
You have to inhale it. So are you to believe that some seafood in a Wuhan market in China coughed, some dead fish on ice, coughed on an innocent customer walking through the shop? This is about the only way that could happen. Then they wanted to blame it on a pangolin, that a pangolin must have coughed on somebody and made them sick. The most recent thing in 2023, the CDC published they believe a raccoon dog started the entire COVID-19 pandemic. You ever seen one of those?
A raccoon dog.
How many human beings have been coughed on by a raccoon dog? I'd like to know. It's pretty ridiculous. But now they've settled on it must have been a lab leak, even though we heard the rumors it could have been a lab leak. This definitely was created in a lab. Mm-hmm. It's created in labs all around the world, not just Wuhan. But the American government agencies want you to think it just came from China. Let's blame somebody else, when in fact, the majority of the funding went through out of our United States government to the North Carolina, to Richard Barrett, or to Ralph Barrick, who then gave money to Eco Health Alliance in New England, and then transferred that money to Wuhan and other biological weapons.
And that can all be
facilities.
proven.
It's only in Anthony Fauci's emails
Yeah.
that Rand Paul did such a great job, Senator of Kentucky, making sure everybody knew that he knew.
Mm-hmm. So it was created. Talk a little bit about what made it so dangerous.
Yeah, so this is really incredible. So for everybody, please pay attention here. There are millions of people around the world right now who are still suffering with symptoms related to COVID, called now long COVID. And if you're watching, there's somebody in your life who's either struggling to breathe, still get their oxygen levels up, they have loss of taste and smell to this day ringing in their ears, they have dementia, they have brain fog, they have exercise-induced asthma, they have insomnia. These are all called long COVID symptoms.
Not to mention so many much worse than even that.
Right.
Like nervous.
All the clots and all that.
Exactly right. So I want to mention what we know that is creating all of these symptoms that linger for so long. There's currently over 200 long COVID symptoms. Those all started by you getting a mild case of COVID, and then these symptoms just persisted. They wouldn't go away. Sometimes your infection would go away, all symptoms of fever, cough, breathing, all that disappears in the first week or two. Then these crazy symptoms show up, and they don't leave. Palpitations, arrhythmias, blood clots, dementia, loss of taste and smell, hearing problems. All of these are being reported as long COVID symptoms. What is causing that? Well, that's the question that answers your question. So in China, in January of 2020, it was published what was causing all the symptoms of what was being called COVID pneumonia in those people in the hospitals in Wuhan, China, in the fall of 2019. And this may be something you haven't heard, but this is how you know this came from a lab. When we talk about lab creation, lab leaks, it wasn't leaked, it was intentionally released. So there are labs all around the world that are creating synthetic poisons. They have learned how to spread them around the world. In January of 2020, the Chinese researchers who were commissioned by the government of China to go test the blood of all the sick people in Wuhan for this novel new virus, they actually published that the antibodies their bodies were producing to fight this pneumonia were actually antibodies against two specific snake venom proteins from a king cobra and from a crate snake in China. They published that in a peer-reviewed published paper. You can still read it. That the origin of COVID was two isolated venom proteins from these two snakes that actually cause neurological symptoms by binding to what are called nicotine receptors to lead to hypoxia, the drop in your blood pressure, your oxygen levels, to cause you to lose your taste and smell, to cause tinnitus, dementia, and difficulty breathing, fever, and body chills that look like COVID or a respiratory virus.
So is that why that smokers were sometimes immune to some of these side effects?
This has been one of the most shocking things to everybody around the world when we do presentations. The doctors you mentioned earlier, we have testified in state capitol buildings all over this country and all over this world in the last 4 years. This is one of the most shocking revelations. A respiratory disease called COVID-19, this virus spreading throughout the world we're all inhaling that causes horrific death and misery and illness. They have published over and over and over since the beginning of COVID in the mainstream media that there seems to be a paradox with this illness. Smokers appear immune to COVID-19 and this respiratory virus. It is still to this day that smokers are the least infected with COVID, least hospitalized with COVID, and ever died from COVID-19 of all demographics, age, gender, it doesn't matter, race, it is always smokers were the least affected, which is weird to most scientists and medical professionals.
Because we know smoking's not good for your lungs, obviously.
You would think they had lung disease that would make them more susceptible to a lung infection.
Right.
However, I mentioned China in January of 2020. In April of 2020, that mystery was answered by researchers in France. And I show you that study in the book, Moving Beyond COVID-19 Lies. These two French researchers actually requested the spike proteins of COVID from the UK and China, and they shipped them to them. And they ran DNA analysis on them and wanted to know, what are they identical to? And they published they are most similar to two snake venom proteins, the king cobra and the crate snake's venom called cobra toxin and bungaro toxin. And they state in the paper, this finally answers. This is in April of 2020, you guys, 4 years ago. They said this finally answers the riddle why scientists and medical professionals around the world are perplexed at two things: why smokers don't get COVID and why ivermectin is working against COVID. This information answered both those questions because these venom proteins actually target nicotine receptors, not ACE2 receptors like we were all taught with COVID. They bind to nicotine receptors, which perfectly explain every symptom of COVID and long COVID. And they published that nicotine is the antidote and even wrote in the study, if all governments around the world would just use nicotine gum, nicotine patches, nicotine agents, they could end the pandemic in 2 weeks around the world.
Wow.
But instead,
Wow.
Dr. Anthony Fauci decided to go into the media the very next week in May of 2020 and tell the whole world that scientists have figured out new data. Smokers are the most affected by COVID, most hospitalized with COVID, and most to die with COVID. So there's no better time than now to quit using tobacco products.
And what
Americans,
about ivermectin? Why was it also working? Because
this was a huge aha moment for me.
Okay.
They actually answered this too. So these same nicotine receptors that these venom proteins called spike proteins are targeting, they published in that paper that ivermectin also binds to these same nicotine receptors, and it is called a positive allosteric modulator of alpha-7 nicotine receptors, which for scientists out there and medical professionals, you know what that means.
Yeah, but we
For
don't,
those
so
of you that are
explain to
sick,
us what we don't.
it means it binds to nicotine receptors like nicotine does from
Yeah.
tobacco products.
Yeah.
And now those venom proteins or spike proteins cannot bind to your cells to make you sick, and your body just pees them out, poops them out, sweats them out as God designed.
Wow. And so ivermectin has kind of been like a wonder drug in all of this. Even like for other viruses, why does ivermectin work? Why is it still an important drug for like traveling and stuff?
Yeah, so ivermectin is a godsend and has been since it was discovered. Ivermectin helps at actually eliminating parasites, all types of parasites, including the big worms called helminths and nematodes, roundworms. But when it comes to viruses, what I've discovered is that over the last 3 years of research that I've done, all you gotta do is go onto any medical journal's website and type in the name of a virus and nicotine receptors, and you will see every virus published by man they know targets nicotine receptors. And the fact that ivermectin is a positive binder to nicotine receptors, this is the preventative measure I perfectly can explain how it helps to remove any concerns of multiple viruses, including, did you know nicotine's a cure for rabies and HIV? And it's
Wow.
published by medical scientists around the world.
So what is it about? Because obviously you don't agree with smoking. That's not healthy for you. But it's the combination of what in the cigarette that's bad?
Yeah, so this is great. In the book, I actually write this because so many people, when I talk about nicotine and this benefit, it appeared, of using tobacco
They think
products.
they're going to go smoke. No, we don't want you to go smoke.
We want you to get the book. We want you to get the book.
Amen. Get the book. Get
Go
the
ahead.
book.
Go ahead and finish your
Yeah,
thing.
so what's in the book I write, there's a chapter 13, it's titled Just in the Nicotine of Time. Anybody out there with any symptoms I mentioned earlier?
Like a little Batman thing, right?
That's right. Just in the nicotine of time. It is published in medical journals and by the NIH that in 2023, they took long COVID patients who couldn't get rid of any of their symptoms for a year and a half. And they asked them to do one thing and one thing only. Wear a 7 milligram nicotine patch for 6 days only, and let's see if your years of suffering disappear. Not 50%, not 70%, not 90% of all long COVID symptoms disappeared in days. It was 100% of all long COVID symptoms disappeared with a 7 milligram nicotine patch for only 6 days. Ask your doctor if nicotine's right for you.
Well, no, you should slow down because, like, you talk the way I talk, and I am very guilty of talking
y'all talk
fast.
too fast, I'm telling you.
You're telling me if I have long COVID symptoms, I can go to my doctor and say, give me a 7-day nicotine patch.
You don't need a doctor to tell you.
You don't need a doctor.
To give it to you.
A 7 milligram nicotine.
Okay, they just give it to you.
They're over the counter. All nicotine patches.
So I just
nicotine gum, you
go to my local pharmacy and go buy one.
or grocery store. Yeah.
Grocery store, slap it on there for 6 or 7 days, and it can definitely, 100% of those symptoms could go away. It's worth just trying. So if you're suffering, you know, Jesus has already given a cure. You just have to go buy it, slap it on there, and see what happens, and send us an email and say, thank you, Dr. Ardis.
So I need to address something, though, that you asked earlier. You asked about tobacco and why we don't recommend smoking.
Right.
Okay, so in tobacco products, the FDA knows this since 1970, and I show you the research study from Harvard in 2016. They published that nicotine is not responsible for making tobacco products so addictive. It's actually man-made chemicals the FDA has known since 1970 have been allowed to be added to tobacco products in America. And those 16 man-made chemicals are called pyrazines. And in 2016, Harvard actually wrote, we would recommend the FDA start regulating pyrazines on top of nicotine that they continue to promote is the addictive substance in tobacco. It is not. It's these man-made chemicals called pyrazines. And one other thing everyone should know.
So you tell me the FDA knew that they were putting chemicals in cigarettes to make the cigarette companies pretty much addictive so that their customers would keep coming back.
Oh, yes.
Well, it's kind of like diet drinks, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't you have the same thing going on that
Absolutely.
makes them addictive? What is that?
Yeah, so aspartame is the primary sweetener inside of all diet sodas. It is extremely addictive. And it also changes your metabolism and actually reduces your ability to burn weight or burn fat. It's
Right.
very interesting. In my practice, I used to take people off of artificial sweetened products like Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke, and I'd go, just drink the real stuff. That has
You'd be
sugar.
better-
And they would lose an
It'd be
average
better to
7 to
drink
10 pounds in the first
the real stuff. What are the good sweeteners that we can use? That we can use stevia?
Stevia, actually, we can talk about stevia. Stevia is actually very well documented and used in tons of products in America. I only warn that people who are trying to have a family, we talk about it in the book actually, infertility is a massive issue. Miscarriages are a massive issue right now, especially since the COVID-19 vaccines came out. Did you know that stevia has been used as a contraceptive by countries around the world to stop you from being able to get pregnant?
Oh, wow.
So for young people, I would say stay away from stevia if your goal is to actually have a family one day. It is physically used.
Well, I'm not trying to
as a
get pregnant
contraceptive.
Yeah, we're
these
good.
days.
We're good.
So we're good for using stevia. What? So like honey.
Are you sure? You're done?
Yeah.
We're sure.
So,
we
honey,
do love grandkids.
we
They're
do.
awesome.
We love our grandkids.
Well, if you want more, make sure you're.
So the other sweeteners, let's talk stevia, there's monk fruit, there's honey,
Fructose.
there's real maple
Monk
syrup.
fruit.
But these are things that God made, right? So are there any others that I left out?
Yes, one of the ones that are being talked about the most right now in the world of GLP-1 drugs is allulose. So allulose is a great sweetener. Erythritol is a very healthy sweetener. Doesn't have a lot of issues, supposedly. Xylitol is used by a lot of biological
Erythritol
dentists.
does have issues, I mean, with a lot of people
They
after
do.
you've
Yep.
used
So
it.
there's a lot of bowel stuff that'll happen. to people.
Exactly, right.
So you'll see some of those. But as far as like cancer, hormone disruption, those are not the things reported with.
Yeah, okay, so tell people,
Monk fruit.
Dr. Ardis, what you need to get the book if you want to learn more about the COVID-19 lies. I remember when we had Dr. Ardis on early, like late 2020, 2021, people thought we were crazy at Daystar. I mean, for talking about ivermectin, having these doctors on, even though they were trained medical doctors, people were just like, there's no way this could be true because my doctor's saying this and I should do this and that. But I just want to say, whether you've had the shot or you haven't had the shot, that there can be healing and restoration in your body. Do you believe that?
Absolutely.
And you give some of those solutions in your book, right?
I do.
Well, I like this little foreign protein cleanse, and I love the ingredient. It almost looks like a great coffee. But explain the foreign protein cleanse at globalhealing.com. This is something that you
This
created.
is something you
I
put
formulated
together,
it.
yeah.
Okay, so because you formulated, talk a little bit about it so that the average person can know, kind of like, go get the nicotine patch and maybe do this and you might be in good shape.
Right, yeah, so the foreign protein cleanse, you see it on the screen. Why I created this was 3 main reasons. The spike proteins of COVID, either you got in your body somehow during COVID or you were vaccinated for your body to produce those proteins. It doesn't matter, they're all foreign. They don't belong inside of you. That's why it's called foreign protein cleanse. There's 3 major things that all the spike proteins and the vaccines do in the human body. They cause neurological damage, blood damage called blood clotting typically, which leads to strokes, myocarditis, and other things. And then acute organ failure is the other published side effect of these poisons and proteins. So in this product, I actually took thousands of documented papers of research studies around the world that actually detox these specific proteins out of the human body for millennia. The cool news is every single one of those ingredients come from nature, and guess who created nature? God did.
God.
I actually have more faith in what God created than what man creates in a lab all day long and calls it a drug or a vaccine. I trust God's science.
So how much is this and how do people get it?
Yeah, so you can get it at the drardisshow.com, the DRARDIS show.com, and anywhere Global Healing products are sold.
And how much is it?
It's $54, I believe, somewhere.
And how long
$49.
does it last?
So this is a month supply.
A month
so it's
supply.
a dropper. You take a dropper, you either just put it straight in your mouth or actually put it into an empty capsule and take it. So 2 things I want to highlight in here. They actually call in the media, many interviewed by you, doctors, have called the COVID-19 shots clot shots because they created a lot of blood clots. This
Right.
is a massive concern, along as with turbo cancers that are being diagnosed in young people all over the world. There's 2 ingredients inside foreign protein cleanse that have been known to our federal health agencies and the science community and medical industry to dissolve all blood clots caused by what they called the spike proteins. And those two plants are called licorice root and cinnamon. And you'll see those two ingredients in there. And then we show you research studies in the book. We put a form of gold, nanoparticle gold in there that enhances these plants' efficacy to boost your immune system's ability to detox out these blood clot causing issues.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And I'm so glad to have you here today to talk about, because I know some of you have really suffered and you still haven't, because I mean, you still write and tell me about what's going on. So be sure and call. We do want to pray for you before the program ends today, but quickly tell us, there's so much more we can talk about, but for people who are watching, what are some of the supplements that are a must for people to take every day? And of course, we've done supplements with you before, and we actually have those that we carry that you help to produce, like vitamin C, vitamin D, et cetera, et cetera. But talk about what are just some of the, you should be taking these supplements every day.
Yeah, I love this question, because all of us are going to be confronted with poisons, toxins, infections the rest of our life. You're being told there's 10 more pandemics coming. Bill Gates just announced bird flu, Ebola, Marburg.
Oh yeah, the bird flu's kicking up.
You know,
yeah,
all these things.
right.
All right, so what should you be taking every single day? Nothing is more important than reducing your sugar intake. I'm talking refined carbohydrates, cookies, cakes, pastries, you name it. Did you know for every gram of sugar you put in your body, it depletes within 75 minutes by half all the white blood cells your bone marrow produces, which are your antibodies
No
to fight
sugar.
infections?
No sugar. It's
So
really
if-
bad.
Yeah, we don't do
If you're
sugar.
worried about getting sick, eliminate the sugar or reduce it for the period you're worried about. And then you need to be supplementing, I believe, every day for the rest of your life with vitamin C, number one. So you should be taking at least 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day. I believe everybody on earth should be supplementing selenium right now, which is a mineral found on the periodic table of elements that God put in the soil that comes into our plants. You can supplement it, and it tells your bone marrow to produce more cancer-fighting white blood cells called T cells and B cells, and it also kills parasites, viruses, and bacteria. Your body's designed to do that, and it needs selenium to do that.
Okay, vitamin C, selenium.
Selenium. And then I believe right now, nothing's more important than bioactive copper. So what most people don't know is 40% of all people that died from COVID, the people that were affected the most were diabetics. Do you know that 90% of all diabetics in the world are type 2 diabetics, and that they are all 100% of them copper deficient? And did you know that diabetes is created by COVID? Same proteins, they called spike proteins, damage the pancreas and cause diabetes. And they actually have published now that in the next 27 years, they believe that the numbers of diabetics in the whole world will triple in the next 27 years.
So quickly, because you only got seconds, vitamin D.
Vitamin D is also another one. Selenium. I believe magnesium everybody should be taking. If you're vaccinated for COVID, within 3 months, please do not take magnesium for the first 3 months. You need to detox using foreign protein cleanse and nicotine for those 3 months before you go on it. But I believe everybody should be on magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin C, selenium at a bare minimum.
Okay.
Are these still available in the shop? Are these still at the
Yeah,
Daystar
yeah,
shop?
we
they are.
still, you can call. We have a whole package that Dr. Ardis helped put together, and people get monthly the vitamins that you helped oversee.
And one of the ones you don't want to forget is zinc. Remember how important it was for zinc?
Yeah.
The spike proteins of COVID deplete zinc from the body, and it leads to many of the symptoms you
So
have.
here at Daystar, we want you whole, spirit, soul, and body. You can go to daystar.com, shop, and find this package of vitamins. We want you to be well. We want you to keep calling whatever's going on in your body. We really hope Dr. Ardis has inspired you. You have to get the book because, first of all, you'll be more informed than anyone else at the coffee or dinner table, and you'll impress your friends, but you will really, you could actually save people's lives or help their lives improve. If you have symptoms, go get that patch as well. Do that today. Well, so many people have called in, and we just kind of just pray over these people. They call from all over the world. We'll go out with that.
Yeah. Dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to be here, be on this wonderful platform that can reach millions around the world. They are your children, and we know that you have all power to heal them, uplift them, carry them, and we pray that the Spirit of God, our Lord Jesus Christ, will be poured out upon the world and help these people not only see improvements in their own lives and their families' relationships,
Amen.
but may they also see the Spirit of God work through them to enhance their lives and those that they work with directly,
Amen.
spend time with. And may we bless and seek the Lord's hand to guide us in all the decisions that we make, even in keeping ourselves and our family and our homes safe and healthy.